General Malik Saab was the chief of army staff that time. Sir was the director general of artillery, all the topai, all the guns. Yesterday night also we were talking about that. So some of your experience that Kargil mountain, that the Pakistani fellows have come there, and you all were asked to go suddenly to evict them from the top hill. I think it was one of the toughest battle because you had the constraint or probably the mandate of the government not to attack from any front, just to get the hill evicted. What did you feel that time, sir? Just some of your leadership initiative to inspire these students.
Morning, everybody. It's a very, very tall order from Professor Balasubramaniam, because if I start talking, I could go on and on and on. It is an experience of a lifetime. It was a very, very major crisis for the country. And the stories of valor, of courage, of bravery, of sacrifice are innumerable. Some of you must have read about it, heard about it, and also seen it on live TV. So for me to talk about it all, as I said, it'll take me a long time. But I'll try in about 10 minutes to give you the major factors and the major issues during that crisis period. Firstly, a bit about the terrain in terms of climate. You heard it, but it merits repetition. High mountains, rugged terrain, inhospitable, bitterly cold, strong winds, and extremely exhausting for anybody because of the altitude and lack of oxygen. The lowest level in that area is about 14,000 feet above mean sea level, and the peaks which were overlooking Kargil are around anything between 18 to 20,000 feet above mean sea level. Now, what transpired was that all soldiers in Kashmir, since the start of the militancy in the valley and infiltration of infiltrators, have been constantly on alert trying to prevent infiltration into J&K. And in the process of that focus on preventing infiltration, some of our attention got distracted from looking at the mountain peaks which are otherwise vitally important for us. And normally what happens in extreme winter from approximately October to March, or no, not March, but till April, May, the mountains get covered with enormous amounts of snow. So a lot of our soldiers come back during that period and then go back to the mountains when the snow melts. So it was during this period that the Pakistanis infiltrated. Sometimes started in November, December, progressively they occupied these heights. And we discovered it only when the snow melted and our grazers and shepherds went up and found that there was an alien presence on these features and they were not allowed to graze. The information came to us, we didn't really know what was happening. People may call it intelligence failure, whatever it is, but approximately 140 kilometers of our, in terms of length and in terms of depth, about varying from 2 to 5 kilometers, a lot of our territory was occupied by the Pakistani, and the nation had a crisis on its hands, a serious crisis. Since there was a lack of information, initially we moved soldiers with the orders just go and evict. Now in that area, because of paucity of resources, we didn't have enough soldiers, we didn't have enough guns, we didn't have enough ammunition, and we didn't have even enough winter clothes. But regardless, we inducted troops and moved them quickly to just throw them out. And to our horror and surprise, we found that these people were well armed, fortified, deeply entrenched, strong, and we took huge casualties in the initial attacks. Many soldiers died, gave their lives. But once the realization dawned on us that it is a critical situation and the nation has to go to war, then we started organizing, gearing ourselves, and endeavor to tackle the problem in a deliberate, systematic manner. We then began by mid-June, I recall, concentrating forces, and the dilemma was because of the advantages that the Pakistanis had in terms of occupying these heights. Now, those who understand basic military tactics, anybody who's sitting on a mountain with weapons is a formidable defense position. There is no way you can throw him out because the person is sitting on a peak, he can look at you, whoever is approaching him, and he has these weapons to shoot at you. So in such a situation, it is very, very difficult to throw out the aggressor or the person who's holding those peaks. The only way to do it is you need enormous amount of overwhelming firepower, one, and two, to try and creep in at night when they can't see you properly. Now, creeping in at night also is extremely difficult because of the terrain, climbing mountains, pitch dark night. You fall, you die. It's very difficult. And the movement up the mountain is only on a single path. You've all climbed mountains somewhere or the other. You can't just go up anyway. You've got to follow the ridge line or the spur or whatever it is. That's the only way to go up. Or you do rock climbing, which can be done, but that needs special effort. So when you're moving up in a line, you're extremely vulnerable. You can be shot at one by one, one by one. Whoever is coming gets shot, the next person gets shot. So it's hazardous. It's fatal. So the only way to do it is when they can't see you and you're bombarding with them enormous amounts of artillery fire. So the chap is keeping his head down because the shells are landing him all the time. And in the process, when he can't look up or look out, you close in. That's the way it's done. So we concentrated an enormous amount of artillery as against about 7 into 6 is 42. As against 42 guns that we had, when initially we discovered the infiltrators, when we had concentrated sufficiently, we had put almost 120 guns there. 120 is more than that. 20 into 18, about 22 into 18, how much is that? 22 into 18? About 360. About 360 odd guns we put on the ground. And the orders to the artillery through that period was, don't let the chap sleep. Don't let him eat. Don't let him have his tea. Meaning that keep hitting him day and night, 24 by 7, 60 by whatever the seconds or minutes are. Just keep pounding him every minute. That will break his morale. That will tire him. That will exhaust him. And then when we want to attack him, then we attack him with enormous, instead of just keeping him awake, now I frighten him. So that was the sort of methodology we adopted. Enormous amounts of firepower we brought down on them. If the normal is, say, on a particular position, 50 guns, we put 200 guns. Break the man. And God willing, I was confident and I had committed to the authorities that we'll succeed. And we did. I'll finish with that.
Sir, you have so many guns. Can't you hit them directly in the hill? So many guns were there, bombs and all things were there. You have to only harass them. It seems to be a more psychological war than hit and kill.
No, we did. We did do direct, what is called a term direct firing, where from the gun you aim at the exact spot and you knock it out. We did that. But there are certain points which you can't, which is behind the hill, behind the mountain. So there for you to hit it directly is difficult because the mountain is protecting the person, and the moment the firing stops, he comes back and starts shooting at you. But we did direct firing to knock out whatever was clearly visible to us. We did that. We did that every time. I'll add one sort of story of irony or destiny, or call it what you may. I had landed in Kargil sometime around 9 in the morning on one of my visits. The helicopter that dropped me at the gun position, the helicopter doesn't stay there because the shelling is continuous, so there was danger of the helicopter getting hit. And when I was to return at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The helicopter was to come and land and take me back. And the helicopter, where it lands, I was to wait there. And the team which was escorting me was with me. They said, let's not stand here because very frequently the Pakistani shells land on this area. So we withdrew and came back. And when the helicopter landed, I went again and I took off and I returned. 2 days later, exactly at that same position, the officer who was escorting me that day got killed by shelling. So it's just destiny. Who's destined to go when?
But sir, despite all these guns and fire, why you all deployed Air Force? It was a small battle. That's why I think that उधर से ऊपर से मार सकता था.
The main problem was regarding the Air Force. It's something when you want, there's a crisis, you want to put everything that you've got. And when we felt that there was a crisis, so there was a bit of, I must confess, anxiety, concern, and at the Army headquarters, Ministry of Defense, and everywhere else, the reaction was, let's do whatever we've got, put it there. So the Army did bid for the Air Force, that let's immediately employ the Air Force to attack them, because even for the artillery to build up takes time. But Air Force could be moved from wherever they were and to hit those features immediately. In the decision-making process, it took a little time, but eventually the government agreed. Because also employing the Air Force on a larger issue, it means what we call escalation. Escalation means that if I use my Air Force, the Pakistanis will be compelled to use theirs, and the fight can spread across other areas. Now, the debate was on whether we should limit the fight, the battle to that area, or to take it across all fronts against Pakistan. I mean, this was a dilemma which the hierarchy was debating, deliberating over, and taking decisions. Eventually, we decided not to do it. But we did use the Air Force, and when we did use the Air Force, I'd like you to draw your attention to a few things. For an Air Force fighter aircraft at the speed, or the bomber fighter, at the speed at which they fly, a dumb bomb, that's a normal bomb, for it to be directed at a mountain top is extremely difficult. You may throw the bomb, but it may not hit that mountain top. If it misses the peak, the crest, it can go miles away. Because then beyond the mountain, there's a huge valley, then the next ridge. So the moment you miss the mountain peak, if the bomb misses it, it goes down and it can land 10, 20 kilometers ahead. So that accurate bombing is extremely difficult. Then the challenge of going across the line of control, where if you recall initially we did lose one helicopter and 2 aircrafts, because there the air defense guns and air defense missiles are operating. But having said that, technology today with sophisticated systems, ammunition, like a laser-guided bomb, which is extremely expensive, you can attack pinpoint from an aircraft, which we did use subsequently. But the number of such bombs that we hold are limited. It's very expensive, they are imported, and you've got to use it with discretion, because if you use it on one target, which is okay, today it's very important, but if the war stretches and I've got to hit more important targets tomorrow, and I don't have that ammunition, then, I may have messed it up. So it has got to be a very deliberate decision when to use such scarce resources. But we did use them subsequently. But the greatest sort of benefit of using the Air Force from our point of view was the psychological advantage that our soldiers got when they saw our aircraft flying over you. It's a great morale booster. It's a great sense of, that my aircraft is above me. Conversely, where the adversary is concerned, it's very demoralizing to see this aircraft coming at you, attacking you. It is unnerving and demoralizing. And a demoralized soldier versus a motivated soldier is the difference between winning and losing a war. So we got that huge psychological advantage.
Last, only one question, sir. They were untrained mujahideen. We all were Pakka Faujis with all our deployment. But still we had such a heavy casualty. Is it ultimately a war won or a war managed?
That's a difficult question to answer. But on the Mujahideen, they were not Mujahideen at all. The Mujahideen were very few. It was Pakistani regular soldiers. They were all Pakistani regular soldiers whom 10 years later, 5 years later, now the governments have been acknowledging, rewarding the families and making it public. At that time they were in a denial mode, but today history tells itself, and official records, Pakistani government has recognized that they were regulars. If on any point there were 100 odd soldiers, people, 5 or 10 were Mujahideen, 80 and 90 were soldiers, regular soldiers. That was one. The second one, why casualties? As I said, initially we were unprepared and we took it casually, I must confess. We reacted not, I'm now being critical about our organization, perhaps we reacted not as professionally as we should have. We were a little casual. We did not seriously assess the situation, so we attacked without adequate preparation. And those attacks, we took heavy casualties. But as I said, subsequently, in no attack did we take casualties, probably 1 or 2. Otherwise, all attacks were without casualties, excepting, as I said, the initial ones. That's in early May. But mid-June onwards, we took very few casualties. And that is the time we hit them the most. About war won or managed, my conclusion is it was managed. I must be honest, we managed. I can't call it a serious victory.
I think, sir, wonderful, Lonnie. Just, sir, thank you very much for starting provoking us, So this is from the horse's mouth. Quite a lot of stories are there. We'll talk to sir later.